the place thousands attend to worship weekly in person or online.
My plans include your future.
A church full of historical moments dating back 180 years. It hasn't always been the Bethel experience we know it to be now. So what do you really know about Bethel? It's not called the oldest existing Baptist church because it sounds nice. Hey, history actually happened here. In July of 1838, the first Baptist church in Jacksonville, Florida was formed under the name of Bethel Baptist Church, starting with 6 charter members, 4 whites and 2 blacks who were slaves of those white members. The first house of worship was built in 1840. And as you can imagine, in true Bethel fashion, the congregation outgrew that building.
Well, it's amazing because that was in a time, and we really talk about, when we say post-slavery, that was about as close to post-slavery as it could be. And to think that after 30 years being in the original Bethel Baptist, where I think I like to use the term that people were called in the Negro or the colored members were very few, but grew between 1838 and 1868. Then in 1868, can you imagine at that period that the colored members became disgusted with having to be seated in a restricted area, and they felt that they needed to go to court about it. And so they went to court in 1868.
That had to be a supernatural move of God for a judge to award this church to freed slaves, because there were so many freed slaves. I believe they outnumbered the whites. And for this judge, during that post-Civil War, to be sure, but you're still in a racist society, to award the name of the church to the freed slaves is probably one of the most amazing things I've ever. Whenever I tell people that story, they think I'm lying, because it just doesn't, seem real that in that day, a judge in the 1800s would do that. And so, of course, they went and started Tabernacle, and of course that wasn't good enough, so they had to do First Baptist. First Baptist came out of Bethel. They're our sister church, but they're not our twin sister.
By 1868, Bethel relocated to a large new building on Union and Pine Streets and was later recognized as an institutional church by the state of Florida in 1894.
Bethel became greater because it became institutionalized in the sense that it reached out to the community like a school, a training. Black Florida Memorial University, in a measure, came out from a group of men who were part of this church and others.
As a place for blacks to progress, by 1895, the church had grown to 1,200 members, which was large enough that another building was required. But only 6 years later, the new edifice succumbed to flames by the Great Fire of 1901. It took 3 years to rebuild, and Bethel became home for many prominent figures.
Matthew Gilbert, who a school is named after. Rosamond Johnson, who of course is the brother of James Weldon Johnson, who wrote the lyrics to Lift Every Voice and Sing. He was my grandmother's piano teacher. Yeah, so Rosamond Johnson. A lady by the name of Sally B. Mathis. There was a school named after her right out by Ribault. So there were just, prominent, probably some I'm even missing right now, that were just prominent people.
A place that attracted so many, some began labeling Bethel the silk stocking church of the city.
All the judges and educators went here.
High class, any other term you want to give for a church of prominence.
Which might explain why the culture of the church was truly Baptist.
Baptist part, we were that. When I say we were Baptist, we were Baptist. No drums, no shouting, no dancing, no tambourines, no women preachers. None of that, not in the Bethel Baptist Institutional Church.
Deacons didn't start off service with a charge to keep, and we didn't have foot, patting and hand clapping. We just weren't that church. The pastor that baptized my father, John E. Ford, was known as a great orator. As a matter of fact, when they built that old sanctuary, they built it so that there would not be a necessity for sound system, because the preacher didn't raise his voice. He was an orator. So the people who liked oratory would come to Bethel, because you had the John E. Ford, who was a great orator, and the more educated pastors pastored this church. So that's what it attracted.
That was who Bethel was, as it was what the members desired. But following the death of Dr. John E. Ford, a shift took place.
We had two others to come succeeding him after he died, and they kept it in the same mold. But we had a pastor that came, who came from Columbia, South Carolina. He was a Benedict student, a graduate. And he was powerful as a preacher, profound as a preacher, but he was not restricted to the culture that was in Bethel. And they called him, and he began the transition of change.
It became the way of Bethel, and Bethel continued to flourish. Eventually, another called to lead the ministry.
My father in the ministry, which was my predecessor, was leaving to go to Texas. I was in that choir. I had preached my first sermon here, and that was it. And I don't know what that was a sign was. I didn't preach it or whatever. But that was just a culture. I continued to do those things that I mentioned, some of those things that I mentioned, but it was all a part of leadership. And when he, from that pulpit, recommended me to be the interim pastor.
Bishop Senior served for a year as the interim pastor and then became the senior pastor of Bethel.
I always tell folk, I don't know how it happened. I did nothing in that 1 year to become pastor. But I always say that God had to be in it.
Leading the growing congregation for many years, by 1988, a new, larger church complex was open. Now the 3-story addition serves as an educational and administrative building, and still, that just wasn't enough space.
The congregation knew that we had outgrown this sanctuary. Remember I told you originally, and during my adult days, that loft was only for 26 people. And that organ was behind, right underneath those pipes. So that growth of the choir was all on the floor, chairs all on the floor. That area over there, behind, over to my right, is an area called the lecture room. I had to begin opening the swinging doors, and that was our additional. Then choirs were growing, so I had to spread them out on this loft over here. So choirs were all there, all on the floor. People were all in the lecture room. Some could see me, some couldn't. Balcony. And I was getting more calls that people who was coming to the church but can't get in. Wow. So this is how I'm sure how God inspired me to want to say, we need to build. I really thought we needed to build somewhere else. And I knew that was going to be a fight, so I didn't dare tackle that. Hindsight, I wish I had.
At the rate the church was going, Bishop Senior knew he'd need some help tending to the members, so he called on his son.
I did not call my son here because he was my son. I called him because he was the capable person, competent person, committed person that I felt we needed.
I told my dad no when he first asked me. No, because my thought was, if you bring me back and the church doesn't bring me back, when you go off the scene for any reason, if I'm still living, they are not required to keep me. I need that church to vote for me. So as the Lord would have it, I came home to preach my dad's anniversary. I brought church choir, flew down with me from Toledo. And I think a week or so later, I think Deacon William Scott went to my dad and was like, Reb, you need to bring your son home. Like, call a church meeting. They called a church meeting, unanimous vote to bring me home. So that's when I said yes, because the church voted to bring me back.
He's like a wheel in the middle of a wheel.
The campus was further expanded in 1999 with a $7.5 million building, which contains a new sanctuary, a conference center, space for youth, and other support groups.
He got up with all power. With all power. All power.
And for years, the duo going strong.
Won't he do it? 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 Won't he? Won't he? Won't he? Won't he? Won't he? Won't he? Yeah!
I saw the untaught generation coming, and I knew that I'd gone through the change of generation in my younger days and what it took to put into nurturing the untaught generation that were continuously coming to this church. And I saw them by thrones, just coming in and coming in. I didn't think the Lord wanted me to sort of like start over again. Not when I had the young person who was really bringing those folk in. So I felt that as God was allowing him to bring them in by the teaching and the preaching, that it was a good time for me to have to retire.
You couldn't get any better teaching, you couldn't get any better preaching, any better leadership than what God has in store in this man.
After a pastor retires, the desire of a church is for them to leave.
I ain't going nowhere, but the Lord be with you.
I had to wrestle with it. But when I tell you I have been in this church for 77 years, for 91 years, I'll say 91 years, not a member. He cleared that the other day. I said, wow, I forgot about that. I thought I was a member when I was born. I'd never been a member in 91 years of any other church in my life. So where was I going? So I had to make up in my mind, I don't care if they turn the pews upside down, I'm just going to sit on the upside down pew.
You're going to be there. Now known as the Bethel Experience, a movement untouched.
It's exciting. It's actually exciting. And it causes me to look for, growing up and coming to church every Sunday, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, and here on Monday nights, and then here every Saturday. Okay, yeah. So I got to the place where I was like, if I don't ever go to church again, I'm really okay with that, right? But to watch, like you say, from every week, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know, what the message is really, how the message is really going to impact you or affect you. So you wake up on Sunday mornings and you're like, I just want to go see what's going to happen today.
A blessing, he puts my name on it. And because my name is on it, you can't have it.
This church is full of, as we keep saying, a little bit of everybody.
Everybody.
You have the judges still. You have some of the politicians. You have teachers. You have. How has that helped progress the African American community coming from Bethel?
I think some of the programs that we're able to do, because we still have the pick of the litter. Best Academy is the perfect example. Being able to do that. The summer school that we started when the county cut it out, we were able to do that because of the kind of people that we still have in this church, So it allows us to still programmatically design things without having to go out and find people from other churches or volunteers from other churches. We have it right here in our church, from educators to politicians to judges who have connections that allow us to do that. It's a great feeling, man. It really is.
Currently the home to more than 12,000 members, the Bethel Church is still leading in unimaginable ways, and Senior Pastor Bishop Rudolph McKissick Jr. says the next season of this church is bigger than we can ever imagine.
Now, you know me, I've never want to bite my tongue. Next is not here. When I mean here, I mean geographically. I ain't being spooky. It's not here. It can't be. Because the vision that I think God has given me for the next 5 to 10 years, we don't have the room to do it. I'm like Jabez, enlarge our territory, but I see a larger campus where we have a school. I want to leave a legacy that's connected to all I did educationally. I want to leave a creative arts legacy. I want a creative arts school. I want a Bible college, but I want a performing arts school that's connected to Bethel. I don't know any church that has that. And to me, that honors the blood, sweat, and tears of my parents and the money they put forth, and it connects me to my journey.